As we come to the end of our series on embracing hope through our heartaches, I'm so thankful for each of our guests who have come on and shared a little bit more about their stories. And as we conclude, today we have a very special guest indeed who has just captured my attention with her story. And I'm so thankful for her time coming on. Her name is Kelsey Kindle, and she's a mom of three, a wife, and a multiple sclerosis activist. So I'm just going to dive right in and welcome you, Kelsey. Thank you so much for joining us on Holly's Highlights today.
Yes, no problem.
Now, if you don't mind just walking us back to the beginning. So what took place that led to the heartache that you've walked through?
It was a Wednesday. I was heading back from an appointment, driving. My thumb was still numb. It had been numb all day, but I didn't think anything of it because I'm like, my thumb's numb, like, no big deal. Then all of a sudden I was heading to the ER because I thought, okay, this has been kind of feeling weird all day. And with MS, sometimes little things lead to bigger things, and then it leads to even bigger things. So I thought, well, it is just my thumb, but you know what? I might as well go get it checked out. It's been all day. And then right then, as I was driving, I started feeling really hot, I was salivating like you're going to be sick. You're like, okay, this isn't right. So I pulled over and I was like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm going to be sick. I feel like I'm going to be sick. So I called my husband and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I feel so sick. I'm on my way to the ER. And he's like, you need to call 911. Now, mind you, where I had pulled over was probably 3 minutes from the ER. So I could see it. And I was like,
Oh, wow.
I'm almost there. He's like, you sound like you've had a bottle of pills and drank a bottle of whiskey. Because what happens sometimes is your speech will slur with MS. It's just anything can happen with MS, really. It's from what I have understood. And my speech was slurred and I'm like, I just don't feel good. And he's like, I'm 45 minutes away. You need to call an ambulance. So I'm on the phone. I called dispatch and I'm like, hi, I'm really sorry to bother you guys. I'm so close to the ER, but I need a ride. And thank goodness I did, because the ambulance showed up. I had gotten sick. The ambulance showed up. They put me on the stretcher. They pushed me in the back of the ambulance. I'm, oh my gosh, freaking out. I'm like, oh, I'm 31. I'm this. I threw up outside of my car. Should I move my car into a parking spot? And they were like, just, it'll be okay. We'll handle it. We got it. Where are your keys? I said, they're in the ignition. They're like, okay, we'll get it. We'll put it with your wallet. No big deal. And then I went black for 4 days. I don't remember anything after that. So thank goodness I did not continue to drive.
Right.
I mean, even just 2 or 3 minutes and then having to wait in the waiting room and blacked out or passed out. So that was kind of what started into the next 2.5. No, I was about 6 weeks. I was in the hospital. So once I got to the hospital, my husband got there, my mother-in-law got there. My parents live in Missouri, so they have no idea of what's going on at the moment. So they're running all the tests and the MRIs and the blood work and everything, and they are all chalking it up to an MS flare-up, which is just, like when you have a sore throat and then you have another symptom that pops up and another symptom that and you're like correlating all of them together. That's what they were doing with my MS. They're like, oh, well, that's why she can't this and that's why she can't that. And it's just MS. So nobody thought stroke. That stroke or MS can mimic stroke-like symptoms. So that was another kind of like, wait, what? So after 4 days, my husband called my dad at the hospital that first day. And so my dad was like, all right, I'll come up. He came up Friday, Mother's Day weekend. He brought me flowers and tried to make it, like somewhat happy, which I don't remember him being there, but I think he was trying to cheer me up and cheer up the whole situation. And that's what I was starting to decline. I wasn't able to talk. I wasn't able to walk. I couldn't really move. I wasn't moving around much in the bed. I was able to follow people with my eyes, and that was about it. And they were like, my husband and my dad and all these people are like, hey, look, she's not getting any better, because with MS, they give you steroids, and the steroids are supposed to help lessen the inflammation in your brain, which then lessens those lesions off of your nerves so that things start coming back. I had a flare up a few months ago and it wasn't severe at all. It was probably my first time being like, hey, this kind of feels wonky, but should I? And they just gave me 24 days of steroids, and that helped that inflammation go down and go away.
Okay.
So that's what they were thinking in those 4 days. And when I wasn't reacting and I was getting worse, they were like, okay, what's going on? And I think the moment that everyone started to really think, oh my gosh, is the speech therapist came in my room after, I think, day 3 to give me ice chips. And she gave me an ice chip. My dad and my husband were there. And I was just supposed to swallow the ice chip. No big deal. Crush it up, swallow it. Well, it got stuck in my airway. And I wasn't able to pass it, to swallow it. So I'm sitting there, and my mom and my dad and my husband can see that I'm kind of struggling. They're pushing the button on the bed. They're asking the speech therapist, what should we do? She's like, I don't know. There was no code blue button in the room that I was in, my dad said, so they couldn't alert anyone other than, like if they wanted to be crazy screaming, but they didn't want to leave me because they can tell that I was trying to get some air, but I couldn't. And that was the one time that I think my flight or fight came in, and the adrenaline almost pulled me out of this blackout moment that I was in for days. And I ended up getting sick over everyone, threw up the ice, my medicine from the morning. Okay. But I was able to get that breath, and then I was blacked out again. I don't remember anything again. And so that's when my neurologist said, okay, let's do, I don't know if it was an MRI or what it was to see, but they realized none of my airway was working. Nothing, my throat, nothing was working. So that is when they decided, okay, we're going to take her down to the ICU of this local hospital here in my town. And they were still doing blood. They were still trying to do testing and stuff. And that's when a nurse came in after about 4 hours, maybe in the ICU. And she said, we're going to have to transfer her to a different, I think this hospital that I was at is more for broken bones, or like reaching out to other hospitals to send patients there for that kind of stuff. But it's more, I'm sick, I don't feel good. It's a small town, so there's probably not a lot of big, high people here, authority wise, or they know a lot. So she said, we're going to transfer her to St. Vincent's. And there's the top neurologists are there for the state and this and that. And they were like, oh, okay, like my husband is, I'm sure it was a whirlwind for him too. Sometimes it's easy to forget about the other people, of like, oh yeah, you kind of went through that with me. Maybe not like in the bed, but it had to have been, when they say, oh, they're going to transfer her and it's a top-notch neurologist team, and he's probably thinking, well, this is just normal, an MS flare. Like, it's not that. We didn't know. I've only had maybe one incident MS wise since I was diagnosed in 2019. So neither of us really knew what could we expect.
Okay.
So 45 minutes, an hour goes by, and they say, okay, great, we got a room. We're going to get the hospital or the ambulance in here. This is like 11 o'clock at night. We're going to get her transferred. It's about a 45-minute drive. We'll let you guys follow the ambulance if you want. Well, my husband and his grandma went home to eat something because they hadn't eaten all day almost, and pack a bag of clothes in case he was going to stay, or if he could. So when they got me, I remember going to the hospital. I remember getting in the ambulance. I remember the ambulance ride. It felt cool in there. And I was like, oh, thank gosh, because I'm a hot natured person and I'm scared for menopause because, oh gosh. But I remember it was really cool in there. The ambulance rider was like chatting to me and, kind of trying to make conversation, but I couldn't talk back or answer or carry on conversation. But she did say, she was like, yeah, my mom has MS, and she had something happen, and the doctors went in and they did some brain surgery, and she's fine now. And I was like, then she said, that's what they had to do to help her out or something, but she never concluded, is she okay? Did she get better? And nothing. And I was just like laying there like, okay, great. But it was all like locked in syndrome. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't ask questions, nothing. So they get me in the hospital. They get me in a room. They do all the switcheroos and whatever. And then there's a bunch of doctors and nurses in my room. And I'm like, oh gosh, okay, I've never even had a broken bone, knock on wood. So I don't know what to expect here. I still can't talk, advocate for myself, ask questions, nothing. And mind you, it's like midnight. So there's a lady that comes in. She's like younger than me. She's wearing street clothes, it looks like. And I'm like, who's this lady? Like everybody else is in scrubs and and I'm like, oh, she must be like a doctor or something. And I gotta remember it's like midnight. So they probably had to call her in. She probably, I don't know if she was there, if she's on call. She says, we need to put you on a ventilator to protect your airway. And I was like, no. I mean, I couldn't verbalize that, but all that I could think about was in 2020, I don't know if I can say, a lot of people are being put on ventilators because they were dying. And this lady just told me at 31, I have to go on a ventilator. From there on, I didn't hear anything else she said. I didn't want to hear anything else she said. I just was shaking my head. No, like, no. So they went above me and called my parents, because at the time my husband and I weren't married. So I had no other than them, my guardians. So at 1:00 in the morning, imagine getting a phone call halfway, across a couple states, your daughter needs to be put on a ventilator. Here's what's going on. So that was probably the start of everything.
So you were diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2019, correct? And
Yes.
then when was this episode took place?
This was May of 2022.
Okay. Crazy. So in result, you're put on a ventilator. Is that kind of the next step? For how many?
9.
9. Wow. You have a wedding coming up, right? So we're back in 2022 and your wedding was scheduled for.
Well, we didn't have a date,
Okay.
but we ended up getting married in October of 2022.
Okay. So this is a lot of information you were having to grasp and deal with. And so you're coming out of the, let's fast forward a bit for our listeners, of coming out of that, being on the ventilator. What took place next? What did they find out had happened? Was it a part of the MS or was it something different?
They didn't know. They still don't know. My neurologist calls me an anomaly.
And how long did it take then from coming off the ventilator to being able to go home?
I was there till June 15th.
Wow.
So probably like a month and a half or so. And that was just doing physical therapy. I mean, I had to relearn how to do everything that you teach your children growing up, when they're toddlers, and you teach them how to walk and you teach them how to feed themselves. And, but they had to teach me how to breathe and talk at the same time, like be able to, as you're talking, because it was really, my breathing was very labored when I first came off the tube. I don't know if it was everything they kept saying, because when I woke up from being intubated, my entire left side of my body was paralyzed, and they didn't know if that was going to be permanent, if that was going to be temporary, some of it was going to come back, some of it wasn't. And I would describe my right side as being drunk. I could move it, but it was like I couldn't control fine. It wasn't pretty. So a lot of therapy, a lot.
So those had to be some of the initial hurdles you were facing: therapy, learning how to breathe and talk and walk. What other hurdles did you find yourself facing?
In the beginning, after they took me off the ventilator, they had obviously taken me off all of my medication, and I am on an antidepressant. So when I didn't have that, I just cried a lot. And it was really hard for me mentally to like accept, okay, here's where I am, and here's where I may be. I might not ever, I mean, I wouldn't say that I could walk again, and I had the hope always, but there was still some doubt of like, wow, this really might not ever do, this might not be a thing for me anymore. Like, I will be 31 in a wheelchair forever.
Yeah. Now you mentioned a key word there, hope. So
Uh-huh.
how did you embrace hope through all of this, through the MS diagnosis back in 2019, all the way up to all of this that was happening that was so out of the blue, it seemed, and then also so intense? How did you embrace hope through all of this?
Um, I would say that my husband and my kids were a lot, and just seeing the little progress that I was making when I was making it. You know, the therapists were really great cheerleaders. They were great therapists too, some of the best, but just seeing other patients in the hospital hallway walking for the first time. Like yesterday they were using a walker and today they're not. And I'm like, you know what? If they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And then I kind of was thinking, okay, if I can do it, and these other people, because you would walk down the hallway a bunch or practice with the walker or whatever, but it was down the hallway so people could see you. So I'm like, maybe I can be a little bit of hope for them, because I was probably one of the youngest people they call it upstairs on the therapy floor. Um, and a lot of these people are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're just like, I just want to go home. I'm done. Like, they don't care. They're like, whatever. But it's like, just to keep going. And that was probably my other thing, was I was only 31.
Yeah.
Like, this was not how my life was going to end, you know?
So young, so young. But I love that. I love how you see the opportunity to exhibit that hope to others. And I think that's so important. And part of why we're doing this series also of embracing that hope through our heartaches, of realizing that we can learn from one another. And it's never a comparison of battle wounds or those scars, but more of an opportunity to encourage one another and to cheer each other on of, you got this. And the road might look a little different for each one. It will look different for each one, but we can still inspire and encourage and help equip those along the way. So I love that perspective that you chose to embrace on that. Now, what did this journey look like for you and those around you as you come home, as you went through the physical therapy, uh, going into getting married? Then, what did this journey look like?
'Cause my husband was there probably every day if he could. It was about an hour drive from our house. So he would drive, pack his little lunchbox, because I think he got tired of the cafeteria food. So he packed his lunchbox, and he's kind of a cheapskate. But him and his grandma were here on the days that my dad had come up to stay with me, because my dad was there. Visitors were able to come in at 9 o'clock, and he was there at 9:01 with his lunchbox and his water bottle ready to go. And he'd
Yeah.
call DJ and my husband and say, I'll stay with her for a couple hours. You guys, you cut the grass, and we live in a small neighborhood. So we had people coming over offering food or bringing meals. Can we cut your grass? Can we give you some gas money? I mean, we had an outpouring of love. I work at a gym. I was a personal trainer. And so I had so many people reaching out, wanting to help. But the therapy was 3 hours a day. And that was like a 3 hour workout every day. I mean, I was sweating, trying to practice learning how to rewalk again, like from going from doing nothing for 2, 3 weeks, maybe, to trying to do something. Your body's just like, wait a minute, we're trying to catch up. But my husband and grandma and his grandma were here cleaning. They were getting stuff moved, because when I came home, they said she'll have a wheelchair and a walker, because she won't be able to walk solely, just like she was when she was at home before. And so they got some stuff moved out of the kitchen. That way my wheelchair could, get around the house, or the walker could move around. And thankfully it was summer. So my kids were with they were with family about an hour away. So they were able to still be kids, enjoy summer. They weren't worrying about mom.
Mm.
And then I could worry about getting back to somewhat normalcy without, not, this sounds really bad, but without the kids being involved, because it is a
Yeah.
lot when you're trying to juggle 3 kids and how to get your walker from your bed across the room to the bathroom,
Yeah.
or having somebody help you walk with the gait belt. There was one time my husband was outside cutting the grass and I woke up from a nap and I thought, man, I really got to pee. So I'm like honking they bought, my sister, my mom bought a bike horn for
Yeah.
me to honk when I needed something. Well, nobody was answering me. And I'm like, I gotta pee, you guys. Like, oh, I can't. I've had 3 kids and now this. Like, when I have to go, I gotta go. So I like walked along the bed and then there was a little stretch of no nothing. And then I went on the sink. And so I was really careful, but my husband came in a little bit later and I said, I walked to the bathroom alone. He goes, you're grounded. Don't do that again. Because they were worried about me falling
Yes.
or something. Showers were a lot different. It probably took me about 6 months or so out of the hospital before I could actually stand up in the shower by myself without my husband not having to be, I'm like, hey, can you come stand in there with me for like 20 minutes, 15 minutes, just so, because I would stand up, wash, and then I would sit down, scrub my hair that way. Because when you have a stroke like issue, or you have MS situation that was as severe as mine was, your brain sometimes goes back to a toddler state. So your balance is off, your emotions are off. I would cry all the time, even when I came home. I would laugh until I would cry, like hysterically crying. And my husband's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's wrong. I would be hungry random times, like I need a snack, like a toddler would. I would laugh at inappropriate things just because I didn't, my brain had to be retrained almost, I guess, is the best way that my family doctor could kind of describe it. So there was just a lot of learning, I think. And, when I was diagnosed in 2019, I was like, oh, okay, well, it's, the neurologist is like, you've had one thing, but your brain looks fine, all this and that. So my husband and I are like, just throw it in the bag and I had to do shots in the beginning for my MS treatment or whatever every 3 days. And I was really like, I really don't want to do a shot, like avoiding it, like dreading giving yourself a shot. I don't know if you've ever having to give yourself a shot, but it is, if you don't like shots, it's not fun. So when I came home, it was just a lot of learning, a lot of new. I remember specifically there was one, it was like a Saturday, and they told me and my husband when I was coming home, the day or two before, they had like family training where your family came up and they explained stuff and they helped and they showed. And they said, if she's going to take a shower, do it in the morning because she's not going to have energy in the afternoon. There's more risk of her slipping. There's more risk of something happening. So it was Saturday morning. My dad was here. My husband went over to his mom's to get some stuff done, but I was supposed to take a shower that day. And my dad's like, oh, we can do it tomorrow. No big deal. I threw a tantrum like a toddler. And my husband's like, I'll come home. Because he had to give me a shower essentially, because this was soon after I came home from the hospital. But it was just those little things. Like normally I'd be like, okay, I can wait till tomorrow. It's not a big deal. Like, go finish what you need to do. But I was just so adamant, like this was what our schedule was supposed to be, and you threw it off. And so it's just getting accustomed to those little things. And I think now that I am better, because 100% I am, but there are times where where he's like, well, did you do this? And I'm like, yeah. And then it turns out I forgot that I didn't. And we are kind of reminded like, oh, right, we are still kind of treading it. It hasn't even been a full year since I've been out of the hospital yet.
Wow.
But for us, I'm so normal, I'm helping him load the trailer with bushes and cutting trees. And it's just it's hard to remember like, oh, wow, this actually did happen. Like we kind of have to slow it down a little bit. Forgot about that.
Yeah, that sounds like that's a good kind of update on how things are going now too, is to be mindful of it's only been a year. And I think that's so important with any of us facing any trial or hardship and enduring any heartache that we have, of giving grace to ourselves, of it's only been, whether it be it's only been a year since you've been out of the hospital, or it's only been, 6 months since that loved one passed, or it's even been 3 years since that situation happened. There's still, so often they say time heals all wounds. And I don't think necessarily that is true. I think that with time, we learn how to cope and learn kind of what our new normal is. And it sounds like for you, that very much is true of having to remind yourself, wait a second, it has not even been a year. So to give yourself a little bit of grace with that. Now, during all of this, did you feel your face encouraged and lifted? And if so, how?
I would say that I was kind of lukewarm when it came to faith during all this, or before and during all this. And actually the hospital that I went to, I don't know if it was Catholic, if it was Christian, but there was a cross in every room with Jesus hanging on the cross. They would have chaplains that would come in every couple days. They would say prayers at noon and before bedtime at 9 o'clock, or at the end of visiting hours. And I would always get so emotional during that time. But I still hadn't grasped. I think I was kind of mad. I was like, it's so great and so wonderful and everything's so good. And oh my gosh, just pray about it. But I'm laying here in this hospital bed paralyzed. I can't even get up to go to the bathroom. I have to call the nurse and they have to bring in a wheelie thing for me to sit on for them to wheel me into the bathroom. I can't even go to the bathroom alone. How am I supposed to praise you right now? Like, I know praise you in the storm and all this and that. How? But I think also I was just so focused on trying to get better. Like, I am one that's like, oh, I can lift 115 pounds on the leg press machine. Well, let's see what 120 is, or, let's max this. So I've always been kind of a go-getter. So I think I was trying to find that go-getter when I was down and out. And I was in the shower probably 6 months after I got out of the hospital by myself. And I just had this epiphany, and I was like, that was the devil. That was because leading into all of this, I was on a new shot for MS that was making me severely depressed. Severely. I mean, I was eating all the things that I shouldn't, a lot of processed food, dairy, gluten, all those things cause inflammation in your body, right? Well, nobody really thinks about the inflammation in your brain. So all of that stuff that I was I knew I felt depressed and I didn't know why. So I knew there was something wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And the doctors were like, no, it's fine. You're fine. These shots are working. Like, no big deal. And I'm like, but I feel depressed. So I kind of had to advocate for myself, because I'm like, I don't like this feeling. Something's wrong. And so that Monday before the Wednesday that I was trying to go to the hospital after my appointment, I had switched medications to a pill form instead of the shots. And I think the devil was kind of upset that I got off of that medication that was making me depressed, because something was upset at me for changing that and getting on a better regiment of what I need to feel better, and wasn't happy about it. And I thought, wow, like, that's because, like, even now the doctors, there was a mass in my left paw. So down by your brain stem at the end of your brain, there was a mass of something there while I was in the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, and then I had an MRI, let's see, so I got it in June. I had an MRI in November for the first time since in the hospital. And the neurologist said the medication and everything is like a slow release. So they couldn't do one like right after I got out of the hospital, because they wouldn't probably be able to see much. Well, by my left pons where that spot was, there's just like a halo, like a faint halo. There's no mass, there's nothing. And I'm like, what? And the doctor's like, you're 1 in a million. And I'm like, can't I win the lottery, get a scratch off or something, and then to be 1 in a million? But instead, let's see, November. So I got married in October, walked down the aisle, no problem with my dad. they told me in the hospital before I left, they said, well, you'll be walking with a device probably for 6 months to a year, meaning a cane or a walker or something. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I don't need. So 3 months later, I was walking up and down the street with my mom, kind of there, not holding on to me, but just there if she needed to be there to catch me. Walking by myself, no problem. I mean, it was, it was like a toddler walking,
Oh.
but I was doing it without any device, um, like now, for instance, I walk in the mornings every morning, usually. The highest that I've got to mileage wise was 6.5 miles, I think. And but I find myself battling with myself internally, because I'm like, the old Kelsey wants me like, try and go 2 more miles. The new Kelsey's like, remember, you have to do this, this, and this at home, and you might get tired, because fatigue is probably one symptom that is just with me no matter what. So back to your question, faith wise, it has definitely increased my faith. Because I wouldn't be here, I don't think, without it. I really don't. I know that I wasn't leaning on it in the moment that I could remember. I wasn't praying every night. I did say an Our Father every time that I saw that when I was on the ventilator, because I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't understand. I can't ask questions to have it explained to me. People just come stand by my bed and look at me like, I don't know. I thought I had like, when I was on the ventilator, I thought I had like a bowling pin, like two, I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. They had my arms strapped down to the bed so I couldn't pull the tube out. So there was a lot going on. And I was, it was a lot. So I think it was hard to kind of focus on, okay, like, let's read the Bible or let's pray, because it was just there was so much going on, so many people, so many doctors and visitors and cards. And I'm just like, slow down. I know what's going on, but I just need a minute to really take in what's going on. And I don't think I really slowed down, because I was like, let's go, let's get out of here. Let's go. I'm going to walk. Let's crank up that treadmill during therapy. Because too, I was having issues. Everything started slowly coming back, but my ankle. So I was really focused on my ankle coming back so that I could walk naturally and normally. So there was just a lot when it comes to faith and having that in the moment. I had faith and I was like, let's do this. But I don't think I really leaned on that, because I was like, how are you going to have faith when you're laying in a hospital bed paralyzed? Like, let's not, but he doesn't always give us what we want when we want, and it was hard for me to understand that. I mean, I've been there in my life where he hasn't given me what I wanted, and I'm so glad that he didn't, but in this moment, I was like, I really want this. Like, I really want to be able to walk and move and do and play with my kids. And so can you make that happen? And he wasn't. And I was like, well, then, like, this is not one of those situations where you're going to teach me by keeping me paralyzed forever. Like, I'm not going to be happy, in the moment. Now looking back, I'm thinking, I'm so glad I went through that. I'm so glad that I came out of it. I'm so glad that I have strengthened not only my faith, but my kids in their faith. And we, are able to go to church on Sundays and talk about what we learned at church, and the kids are kind of understanding it better. And I don't think that would have ever been had all of this had not happened,
Yeah. Two things that kind of come to mind as you talk there is one, when you just feel overwhelmed, you're mentioning just looking at the cross, and it's just like so much going on. And that's where I'm reminded of the verse where we're reassured that the Holy Spirit will intercede for us. And so when we don't know what to pray, when we don't know even what to say, because it's overwhelming, it's too much or whatever, the Holy Spirit can intercede for us. But then also, when things do seem so bad and we can get angry or mad or whatever it might be, to, as my dad has always shared, a quote of don't forget in the dark what God has shown you in the light. And in those tough times that we go through, God is still the same as the God who is so good and gracious in those good times when our face has been lifted and everything's going well. And so we can trust him. And that all goes back to what we talked about with hope as well. So any advice you give to those perhaps walking through their own heartache right now?
Just do not give up. You can't. I mean, there were plenty of times that I laid in that hospital bed crying because I didn't understand why me. Like, what? I mean, I'm a mom of 3, gonna get married soon. Like, I can't, I don't have time for this. And I mean, I know God doesn't care if you have time or not. If you don't make time, he's gonna make it for you to make you really grasp, understand, but it's hard to see that there is a reason when you're in the thick of it, but there always is a reason. And, I like to think that part of my reason, maybe there's some things that I don't even know yet, but I think part of my reason is so that I can share these things. I went to an MS walk a few months ago and I was able to walk that 3 miles. I mean, I'm not bragging, but I think, but there were a bunch of people with like friends. I had just went alone for this first one just to kind of see what it was like. And there were people with their kids and their dogs and all kinds of people. But I finished it. Nobody finished in lapping time or, like in order. But I finished it in second place, quote unquote. There was one lady in front of me and then like the runners. But I was like, I was able to do that. And there were people that were, it looked like they were pushing their kids in wheelchairs. And I thought, if I had given up, that could have been me. That could have been if I had just stopped and said, well, it's too hard. I'll just have to go in a wheelchair forever. Like I'm glad to have that perspective. A lot of people can't say that they've been there. Oh, I understand. I know what you're going through. No, you don't. You don't. And that's okay. So instead of turning it into this horrible thing that happened to me, I have seen what I am grateful for now, like what I didn't have then, but I have now. Like, I'm so grateful to do these things. I'm grateful to go for my walks in the morning or to play with the kids outside. Like, I was grateful before, but I didn't realize how grateful I should have been for all those moments previous to this, because it all could have been wiped out if he wanted it to happen that way, but he didn't. He wasn't done with me. So I try to share my story whenever, wherever I can. Because those parents that have to push their children in the wheelchair, they might be feeling hopeless. I mean, yes, their children are still here, but they want to play and run and watch them walk across the stage at graduation or whatever. And maybe there is still hope, and you never know. So what is the harm in continuing to try and pushing forward? If you lay down like a dog, you're not going to get much out of the situation. But if you press forward, even when it's hard, on those hard days, I remember crying in therapy all the time. And then the nurses are like, do you need a minute? I'm like, no, just let me keep going. Do you want a break? No, I want to keep going. I want this, for occupational therapy, I had to like put a ball on top of this little cone and try and like balance it and stuff. And it kept falling. And she's like, well, just take a break, So once I took a break and I came back to it, I was able to do it. And so I think maybe God was telling me, you need to take a break. And I didn't listen. And he said, you need to take a break. I'm going to make you take a break one way or another, because I was the mom doing everything for everyone all the time, not taking care of myself like I should. And so I think God was telling me, hey, you need a break. And I did have a break. I had a really long break. And, the nurses are like, oh, just think of it as a vacation. And I was like,
there's a lot of other ways to take a vacation, huh?
like, this is not the vacation I would have wanted, but looking back, it definitely was. My husband all the time in my ear, you have to stay strong for the kids tonight. We need you at home. And of course that would make me cry because everything made me cry that he said, because he's very big burly man, so to hear him say these things we had been together for, was it 6 or 7 years before we got married. And so, in the hospital, he's like, I should have married you when I could. And I said, no, I'll walk down the aisle one day. If I get out of here, here's what I want. I want to go to this person's house in Missouri where they have tons of acreage. I want to walk down the aisle with my dad. I want, so I was naming all these things off, and he's like, okay, we'll make that happen. And we made it happen, small, just my family and a couple friends, in my dad's friend's backyard that looked like a park. They built the trellis out of trees, and it was perfect. And it was just what I wanted. But being able to walk down the aisle was just emotional in itself.
Yeah. Now we have a signature question here on Holly's Highlights, and that is, if you could go back and encourage, inspire, or equip yourself as a child, what would you tell your young self?
I would tell my young self that God is always with you. He will never leave your side. So even when things get tough, whether it be heartache or the passing of someone or something like this, lean into your faith. That's when you really need to lean into your faith. I think that I would I would probably press that on myself a lot more than my parents did when I was a young kid. So I think that it would just be, you have to have faith always.
Awesome. Kelsey, where can our guests connect with you?
Facebook.
Okay.
I think my name is Kelsey _Kindle, I think, for Facebook, or if they want to email me at Kelsey, KELSCY @chronichealthclub.com.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to include those in the show notes as well. And then for those who might be interested in more information on MS, the website there is nationalmssociety.org. So that could be a good reference also for more information. Kelsey, thank you so much for taking time to come on today and to share your story and to embrace that hope and share that with us as well. We really do appreciate you and your time.
Thank you.